Hello everyone, I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight, let's begin. Feel the helpful monster under his bed. I crouch by my child's bed for the third night, face on the blankets weeping. Another day of begging the police for updates and getting none, of putting up posters, of spreading the word on Facebook, and still no news. The last of my hope is starting to drain from me. What kind of mother can't look after her own child? Suddenly I hear something clear its throat. Surprised, my head jolts up, wiping the tears from my eyes. I look around until I see something that makes me scream. Some kind of baby-faced doll head is poking out from under the bed and looking directly at me. I think rationally. It must just be a toy. My vision is still blurry, so I'm not seeing it right. I go to rub my eyes again, but then it speaks. About your child, it says, I need your help. Acting purely on animal instinct, I stand up and run to my room. Shuffling through my nightstand, I grab my gun and stand there with my back against the wall, trying to figure out what to do. Do I hide here or go back to Andy's room? An answer is given to me as the doll head extends itself from my own bed, and I see that it's attached to some kind of stalk. There's no need to be afraid. I'm Andy's friend. I shoot, but I miss, putting a hole in my floor. The head retracts back under the bed. Okay, I see you're disturbed. Adults' minds aren't as flexible as children's. So this reaction is expected. Would you be more comfortable if I talked under here? I crouch down and try to see under the bed, starting to regain some calm. I left my phone in the other room and the light switch is on the opposite wall, so only the dim light from the hallway illuminates. Whatever it is, all I can see is some kind of amorphous shape and the faint outline of the doll's head. Like I said, I'm Andy's friend. I was quite disturbed when he didn't come to bed 2 nights ago. Normally I'd find him at a friend's house, but I couldn't find him anywhere. I returned here to hear you talking to the police, and that's when I knew something was wrong. Finally, managing to speak, I stammer. What are you? That's not really important right now, but let's just say I'm a protector. Unfortunately, my influence is limited to the undersides of beds. A protector? Are you saying you can help me find Andy? Not quite. Actually, I've already found him. I just can't get him out. I spring to my feet, ready for action. Where? Tell me where to go. Unfortunately, I can't tell you where it is in terms of your world's geography. In terms of what? I can't guide you there, but I can take you there. My head is spinning. How can you do that? Well, you'll have to join me under here and allow me to envelop you. I'm not sure what that means exactly, but it sounds terrible. I don't know if I really trust this thing, but it's the only lead I've got. If you can really do that, let me get my phone. Of course. I go to the other room and grab my phone from the nightstand. As I do, I look down and see the doll head watching me once more from Andy's bed. I crouch down, aiming my phone at this creature, and go to turn the flashlight on. I wouldn't do that, it says. I think it will make your journey more distressing if you do. I'm not sure if that's really true. Wouldn't it be better to at least know what I'm working with here? I consider turning it on anyway, but decide that it doesn't really matter. When I get under that bed, it's either going to kill me or take me to Andy. Knowing what it looks like won't change that. You should hurry. I'm not sure how much longer it will be safe. I'd recommend to close your eyes and crawl under the bed and let me take it from there. I follow its instructions. At first, I lay under the bed, not feeling anything. Then a warmth starts to envelop me, but not a pleasant one. I feel like I'm being covered in fresh, raw meat. It squeezes itself all around me, even smothering my face, and for a terrifying several seconds I'm unable to breathe. Then it retreats, and I find myself no longer laying on the carpet, but on hard concrete. I look around but can't see anything. Of course it's dark. The creature is nowhere to be seen. I turn my flashlight on, exposing a bare concrete floor. I crawl out and my heart drops as I see Andy lying on the metallic cot. He seems unharmed, but he's tied up, blindfolded, and gagged. "Andy!" I whisper scream. I almost normal screamed, but decide against it, not knowing if the person who did this is nearby. I get to work untying him while trying to comfort him. "Mom's here for you. Everything will be okay now. I promise." Even after ungagging him, he's silent, most likely too terrified or traumatized to speak. I hug him tight for a few seconds and then get back into action. Finally, not focused completely on my own son, I look around the room. It's a large room, perhaps an abandoned workshop of some kind, and there are other children tied up similarly. Quickly, I take some pictures as well as a screenshot of my location on my map app and text them all to the police. I start to untie the next closest child, but then I hear footsteps coming from outside, getting closer to the room. I think to the gun still in my pocket, but don't want to risk anything, especially with Andy here. For all I know, it's multiple people coming, and they could all have guns too and would probably be a better shot than I am. I crouch back down under the bed. "Oops, thing, get us out of here." No reply. Not knowing what else to do, I grab Andy and pull us both under the bed. I hear the metal door screech open and several men enter the room. The lights come on and I hear one of them say, "Hey, one of the kids is missing." They start getting closer and I know the cot doesn't provide much cover. I grip the gun in my hands. Luckily, I don't need to use it, as I feel the warmth start spreading itself across my back again. "Apologies," the thing whispers, but provides no explanation for its tardiness. After another disgusting transport, Andy and I are back on our warm carpet. I hold him close and sob and feel the warmth lay itself on both our shoulders in an apparent attempt at comfort. I tuck Andy into his bed, and it's not long before the police call me asking how I got into that building and how I even found it in the first place. I'm unable to give them a proper answer, but I don't care right now. I'm just overwhelmed with joy to have Andy back. Not getting any information from me, they let me know they'll be conducting a raid shortly, but I'll have to do a better job answering questions when a cop arrives at my door in a few minutes. Unbothered, I simply say, okay, and lay in bed with my child, spending as much time here as I can until I have to go face the consequences. As I lay there with him, the doll head rises above the edge of the bed and its smile seems wider than before. Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. Nessie is not what we thought. No one ever really believes in the Loch Ness Monster anymore, do they? Since the first time it was introduced in a local newspaper in 1933 as a picture taken by 2 idiots in a really old camera, everyone and their mother has seen it. My question to you would be, how could a monster live for this long? I used to believe in Nessie when I was very young, watching TV shows like Monster Quest, which dragged in people to talk about the weird things they saw in the water. I loved everything sea monster, sea serpent, and dragon-like, until I committed the unfortunate act of growing up. A part of me still loves the idea, even now. But considering where I am right now, I wish I had just stayed the fuck home. This story will sound fantastical. It'll sound like a hoax. It'll be exactly what those Monster Quest idiots thought would sound like a really convincing story when they brought those country folks in and stuck them in front of a washed-out 90s TV camera. I'm writing to keep myself from hyperventilating down here, so hear me out. Never, and I mean never, go out on a massive body of water with zero knowledge on how to drive a motorboat. Just trust me, it'll get better. I promise that I meant absolutely no harm when I stole the motorboat from my gracious hosts when they went out for dinner together. I promise that I wasn't that high when I was out on the water. Now I know what you're thinking. Something along the lines of you probably had some weed laced with something stronger and tripped so hard you thought you saw something. What I experienced wasn't a trip. I wish it was. The high itself was nice. It was from just a bit of weed baked lovingly into some of my favorite cookies. It was because of that mellow, calm feeling that made me feel that it made sense at the time that I could probably figure out how to drive a boat. People did it all the time, so why couldn't I? By the time I was on the water, I was experiencing some kind of euphoria. The moon was more beautiful than I had ever seen it, and its ivory light danced across the cold waters of the loch. I remembered thinking how my childhood self would be freaking out if she knew I was standing on a boat in the middle of the only place she had ever dreamed of seeing for the sole purpose of catching a glimpse of Nessie. Nessie the hoax. I sat down by the edge of the boat and watched the water, entranced, with my arm dangling over the side, skimming the glimmering surface with the tips of my fingers. The cold felt delicious, and the freedom I could feel in my veins injected me with a sort of childlike, romantic joy. About 5 feet away from my hand, watching me from the water, was the large top half of a human face. I don't remember what I did or how I reacted. All I can clearly recall in my memory was how large it was. It looked like a giant's head. Its nose and mouth were concealed by the inky water, but the eyes and forehead were visible. It had hair so black it looked like the water it floated in. And I remember distinctly how the scent of an off-smelling perfume wafted over me. The eyes were... I couldn't for the life of me tell you what color they were, how they were shaped, or how big they were. It's like they've erased from my memory, and all I feel when I try to think of them is a sense of wrongness. And the knowledge that what I was looking at I wasn't meant to see. I couldn't look away though, and whether it was from fear or from fascination, I remember not being able to do much of anything other than stare with my heart in my throat. She wouldn't blink. I thought about how weird it was that she wasn't blinking, and then she spoke. It's been a while. I sputtered in surprise at the volume. It was like she was speaking in my ear, and only then did I break out of my paralysis and scramble backwards into the center of the boat. She didn't move from the water, she only stared at me with those fucked up eyes. "Do we know each other?" I asked, not having the slightest idea of what to say. "No," she replied, the voice still as if it were right in my ear. It was smooth and silky, comforting. Oddly enough, it reminded me of my mother, and my rapidly pounding heart relaxed. Whatever she was, she had an effect on me, and that alone should have sent the alarm bells ringing, but it didn't. I slowly approached the side of the boat and got to my knees, gripping the cold metal of the railing and shivering slightly. Whether it was from the chill or the circumstances, I don't know. It's kinda late to be out swimming. I tried, hoping beyond all hope that this was just a very tall, creepy Scotland native out for a dip. A delicate tinkling laugh floated through my mind, and I realized that whatever this thing was, it was speaking to me through some kind of telepathic link. Or I might have been higher than a kite. I don't really know anymore. "It's kind of late to be out in a boat that doesn't belong to you," she replied. "It felt like a good idea at the time." "Does it feel like a good idea still?" "That depends on whether or not you're real." "What does me being real have to do with the fact you stole a boat?" "Wait, how did you know this boat isn't mine?" Again the laugh echoed in my head, and I leaned further over the boat, getting used to the odd, wrong eyes that looked up at me from the inky waters. "I know everything that goes on this lake," she explained very slowly. "I know the man who this boat belongs to, and I know his wife. I know everyone that comes to visit, and I know everyone that lives here, regulars to guests, to the animals that drink the fresh waters from the river that flows into the loch." "How?" I asked. "It's a secret." "What are you?" "That's also a secret." "I'm good at keeping secrets," I attempted. "No, you're not," the creature said with a smugness I could hear without the expression to match it. "You're terrible at lying also, and you've waited your whole life to see something remarkable, haven't you?" My body went stiff, and I felt the cold wind off the lock seeping through my jacket and teasing my already bristling skin. There was a muted sense of absolute danger itching at the back of my skull, but whatever kind of spell I was under had me rooted there. And I knew it. But oddly enough, I didn't really seem to care. I still don't. I appear to the people who truly believe in something greater than themselves. She said, her wrong eyes boring into me. To the people with love in their hearts. The kind of people who want something extraordinary to exist, not because they want to have proof, but because they want to experience it. To believe in it. I didn't know what to say. Less and less have come by lately. You're Nessie, I heard myself say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears in comparison to the voice that spoke in my mind. I am what you believe me to be. If you're what I believe you to be, why aren't you a giant plesiosaur or a massive sea serpent? You grew up. I blinked at her, and then I felt my heart begin to race as the rest of her slowly rose out of the water. I wasn't entirely sure what I was seeing, and I'm not entirely sure of it now. It was like trying to make sense of an abstract art piece that looked like several things at once. I'll do my best without trying to sound insane, okay? Imagine the head of the most beautiful woman you've ever seen. Think. Keira Knightley or like Ana de Armas, and then connect it to the body of the biggest snake you've ever seen. Like a fucking jungle anaconda that'll swallow a crocodile, but instead of the big blotchy spots, it looks like it has the scales of a black dragon. I wasn't that high, I swear. Despite what I knew I was seeing, I couldn't deny that it was beautiful. The moonlight glinted off her scales and dazzled me with its brightness. My chest was hurting, and I couldn't tell if it was because of how heartbreakingly beautiful she was, or if I was terrified. In retrospect, I believe it was both. The eyes. I remember the eyes holding me in place as the beautiful creature lowered itself to be eye level with me. "What are you really?" I asked, breathless. The creature didn't reply, but as she moved closer to me, all I could see were the eyes. "I've been trapped here for centuries," she replied, her voice echoing through my mind like it was a wide-open space. God, what color were her eyes? Bound to the water and forced to read the hearts of humans, to become their dreams, to embody their fears. Bound by what? I asked. My mouth hadn't moved, but still the question was asked. Then she said something I can't remember. Maybe I don't want to remember. Maybe my brain is blocking it out so I can remain as sane as I can possibly be. But I don't know what good sanity will do me anymore outside of writing this down. The thing she said sounded more like a picture than a word, and it was so horrible my body reacted viscerally. I might have thrown up, I might have passed out, but all I remember is the soft command to hold my breath. The next thing I knew, I was here in the dark with my waterproof phone and a whole lot of skeletons. There's an underwater cavern system at the bottom of Loch Ness. Did you guys know that? There's a fun little air pocket down here that this thing's been living in for a while, like a teapot, short and stout. God, there's a skull right next to me that I've been avoiding eye contact with, and I finally gave in just now. It's dark down here and my phone is dying. Isn't that funny? It's always right before someone dies in the really scary horror movies that their last bit of light dies. Batteries go out, electricity gets cut off, phone lines go dead. There's no service at the bottom of Loch Ness, by the way, and it would be perfectly understandable if I wasn't about to fucking die down here. Who would I call? 911, what's your emergency? Have I got a weird story for you? I don't want to die down here. She's out there hunting, but she'll be back soon, and I'll end up just like the rest of these people who were dragged down just like me. There's no way out. Please. My name is Redacted and my dad is Redacted. I live at Redacted and I have 2 sweet cats who won't know where their mama is. Weirdly enough, just knowing that they won't know where I went makes me feel worse than the idea of my own mortality. I hear her. She's back. God, I hope it's quick. Her eyes are every color that's wrong in the world. Story 2 ends here now. We drift into story 3. And, the rain wouldn't stop. Several months ago, I made the decision to completely blow up my life. Impulsive, yes. Not well thought out either. If you were to ask me why I did it, I'm not sure I would have been able to offer a cogent explanation. I guess I was just feeling trapped. Starting to get tired of it all. It was a Monday morning. I was on the metro going to work as usual. But when my stop came, I didn't get up. I remained sitting until the end of the line, arriving in some industrial part of the city I'd never been to. I stood up and walked off the train and onto the platform, breathing in the cool air. I checked the time on my phone. 8:10 a.m. A few minutes later, I got a text from my boss. "Where are you?" A message that would have usually sent me into a panic, but at that moment I just felt too detached from everything to care. A strange kind of feeling. I guess something in me just snapped. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Going to work and then coming home and studying in the hopes of advancing in a career I couldn't have cared less about. I've been working forever. Going to school forever. Always told myself that somebody I wouldn't have to anymore. But I'd stopped feeling so sure about that. I made my way out of the station. With the morning rush settled, it was mostly empty. I chose a street at random and began walking until I found a bar. After a few drinks, I was smiling, not just because of the alcohol, but because it felt like I'd regained some semblance of control. Later that day, I bought a paper map from a dollar store. Went home and pinned it to my wall, then closed my eyes and threw a dart at it. First time it landed in the Pacific Ocean, second time somewhere in Malaysia. Never been to the country, and so I booked the first flight available and flew out a few days later. I spent a week there. Didn't have an itinerary or a schedule the entire time, just went wherever the wind would take me. I wandered around, went bar hopping, tried new foods, made new friends. Slowly I could feel my world begin to open up. When I got back to my apartment, I threw another dart. 2 days later, I was on a flight to Sao Paulo, then Montreal. One day I got home and found out I'd been evicted. Wasn't really surprised, and it didn't really matter. I just booked another flight. I looked over my finances and determined that I had enough savings that I'd been planning on using as a down payment someday to keep this going for about another 5 months. Then a risky night in Macau gave me enough for another 3. Of course, I was still wary about what I'd have to deal with when it all ran out. I told my family I was just going on vacation, but somehow they'd found out I'd stopped showing up to work. I'd been avoiding picking up their calls, but eventually did so just so they wouldn't try and file a missing persons report or anything. I explained to them what I'd been doing, and it was like a switch had flipped. Any hint of concern in their voices suddenly melted away, replaced by this tone of annoyance, borderline rage. They told me that I was going to regret this, that I was ruining my life, that if I came to my senses and returned home right now, maybe they could help me pick up the pieces. I just hung up. I considered getting odd jobs in various places, which I did for a while, but then I just stopped caring. I should have been careful, fearful for the future ahead. But I wasn't. For the first time in my life, I was free, completely uninhibited. I just wanted to keep riding the wave. Soon I had visited 22 different countries. I'd made more friends, experienced more in those months than I had in my previous 29 years of life. I didn't want to stop, and I wasn't going to. The Netherlands was my 23rd. One night I left a house party in Rotterdam with a girl in a blue dress. My mind was hazy, under the influence of a cocktail of different substances. I followed her into dense woods where she supposedly lived. In retrospect, the alarm bells should have been going off. In the moment, I just didn't care. The trees and brush seemed to grow thicker, more hostile the further we went. We walked for a long while, but every time a concern would start to creep into my head, she'd pass me the bottle, give me a look seductive enough to nullify my fears. Even in the darkness, her cold blue eyes seemed to glisten. Eventually, we arrived at a house in a clearing. I remember entering the place, but not much more afterwards. I woke up the next morning in an empty bedroom. Everything was bathed in a gray, muted light. There was a loud, steady drumming against the windows and the roof. Rainfall. No idea where the hell I was, but the hangover was nasty enough that I didn't immediately question it. I looked around the room, pretty bare bones. Other than the bed, there was a small dresser, a mirror, 2 paintings on separate walls. The closet was open, revealing nothing inside. The air smelled stale. I could feel traces of dust in my throat and nostrils. I stumbled into the bathroom and threw up for a bit. Then I washed my face with cold water, drinking some of it straight from the faucet. Then I laid back down, listening to the rain as I tried to piece together what happened the night prior. Memories of the party came back to me in fragments. The music festival I'd been at before that. The breakfast at the hostel, the girl, the woods. I began looking around for my phone and wallet, relieved to find them on the floor beside the bed with no cash or cards missing. After my headache had dulled into something manageable, I got out of bed, left the room. The hallway was just as empty, silent, still no sign of anybody. I called out and got nothing back but a strange echo, as if this place was much bigger than what I could see. I checked the other rooms upstairs, nothing still. Then I went downstairs, and it was the same story. I sat down on the couch and checked my phone to see if I'd taken down a number, somebody I could call. But it didn't seem that way. The last message I received was from some dude I'd met at the festival earlier. Nothing that could have been from the girl in the blue dress. I found it strange just how much faith she must have had in me to leave me in her place alone like this. But I guess it was mostly empty anyways. Not much to steal. And then that cautious part of my brain lit up. What if this wasn't actually her place? What if I'd just been led into a really bad situation? I stood up and raced to the front door, taking a deep sigh of relief when I realized I could open it. The front porch was decorated with a few potted plants and 2 old rocking chairs, white paint peeling off of them. The air outside had a pleasant sweetness to it, something almost calming to breathe in. But the rain was a different story. It was chaotic, oppressive even. Pouring harder than I'd ever seen it pouring anywhere before. The ceaseless deluge of droplets smacking the ground, producing a near-deafening wall of noise. I'd never heard about a hurricane hitting the Netherlands, and this didn't seem to be one, because there was no wind. The rain was coming down in a completely straight line, no thunder or lightning either. It was difficult to make out any of the surroundings, though I could still tell I was surrounded by woods. I squinted ahead, eventually spotting the clearing we'd come through, but the idea of venturing out and trying to find my way through the forest in conditions like this sounded god-awful. I decided to go back inside, wait it out. It wouldn't have been so bad if I could just scroll through Instagram or something, but my phone battery was sitting at around only 25%, and I hadn't been able to find a charger. I didn't want to be stuck out here with a dead phone, so I decided to explore the house instead. There really wasn't much to note. If I had to guess when it was built, I'd say maybe 20 years ago. Nothing close to modern, but not exactly ancient feeling either. It actually reminded me of my childhood home in the suburbs. Upstairs there were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Sounds like a lot of space, but the layout was pretty tight. Not a lot of space between. Making up the downstairs area was a living room, a kitchen, a small laundry room, and then one more room behind a locked wooden door. Could have led down to a basement, or maybe it was just a closet. Not that I really cared. I just wanted the rain to stop. I didn't know how it was possible, but it only seemed to be ramping up. I checked the weather app, but it claimed that Rotterdam was only partly cloudy, with a 5% chance of precipitation. Nothing about extremely heavy rainfall in the news either. I shook my head, feeling the confusion and frustration beginning to proliferate. This was insane. I went back upstairs, looking through every closet in the hopes of finding a rain jacket, an umbrella, something that could give me a fighting chance. but there was jack shit. I checked the time, 2 past noon. Fuck it, I thought. I'll just try and brave it. See how far I can get. I did find something at least a little bit useful in the kitchen. A full, unopened box of garbage bags. I turned one into a makeshift jacket, using a knife I found in the drawer to cut out head and armholes. Then I fashioned another one into a hood. I used a third to wrap tightly around my phone to minimize any water damage. Then I ventured out, and I didn't get far. The second there was no longer a roof covering my head, it felt like I was drowning. The bags really didn't do much to help. Every second I was forced to wipe water from my eyes, making it nearly impossible to tell where the hell I was going. The forest floor had turned into a muddy swamp, my shoes pulling up heavy clumps of wet earth after every step. I was cold, uncomfortable, slowly losing my shit, but I was still determined to press forward. That was until I saw the people standing at the edge of the clearing. I had to do a double take. I really hadn't noticed them at first. Almost as if they just suddenly appeared. Should have been good news, right? There were people around. Maybe one of them could help me out. But the details didn't support that conclusion. There were a staggering amount of them, what appeared to be dozens, all just standing there, perfectly still. They could have been mannequins. I stood in place, waiting for one of them to say something, waiting for any kind of reaction at all. I tried making out their faces, what they were wearing, though the rain made it difficult. The only thing I was reasonably sure about was that their frames were tall and slender and that their skin was strangely pale, devoid of any color at all. Then I started wondering why I was able to notice this, why I was able to see a perfect outline of their bodies. They were naked, I realized, all of them from head to toe. I turned, began scrambling back towards the house. That's when I saw more. They were scattered along every inch of the clearing, all pale, naked, just standing stationary between the trees. The house was completely surrounded by them. I slipped and fell about 4 times before I finally made it back inside. My entire body was soaked, my legs, arms, and back slick with mud. I was shaking my head, really not wanting to accept whatever the fuck was happening. This was a dream, I tried to convince myself, a really fucked up, vivid dream. Wake up then. Motherfucker, wake up. I waited for a long time before accepting that I wouldn't. I looked through a window. The pale figures were still there. It didn't look like they'd moved at all. I pulled out my phone. According to the weather app, it was now mostly sunny. 0% precipitation. This was all too much. I was panicking and decided it was worth dialing 112, the emergency line in the EU. The signal wasn't great, but I still managed to get through. I tried explaining to the operator what was happening in a way that made me seem the least insane. I'm in a house in the woods. Heavy rain outside. Strange, potentially malicious people surrounded me. After I'd finished speaking, there came a long silence on the other end. I sound like a lunatic, I thought to myself. She thinks I'm crazy. I looked through the window again. The figures were still there, but maybe it was a good thing if I She thought I was crazy. "You need to send somebody over," I said. "I don't know the address. I don't know where I am." "Send somebody over, send somebody now." I paused. "I really need to get the fuck out of here." Eventually I heard her sigh. "I'm sorry, I can't do that," she said. Her voice sounded shaky, as if she were on the verge of tears. "Why?" I asked her. "Can't you trace the call or something, anything?" "I'm sorry," she repeated. "We won't be able to find you." I asked her what she meant. "It's happened before. We searched the woods for weeks for the house that you're in, but we were never able to find it." I stammered for a bit, suddenly unable to find any words. "Listen to me," she continued. "I believe you, everything you've said. The first time I got a call about it, I didn't. But it's happened enough now that I know something's going on. But stay calm, don't panic, just listen carefully." My head was starting to spin. I didn't know how to react to that, but I obliged. I told her that I'd listen because what the fuck else could I do? "You're not doomed," she told me. "Eventually the rain will stop. It might not seem possible right now, but you need to be patient. Don't lose your head. Do not panic. You need to be as lucid as possible because when the rain does stop, you need to run like hell. You'll have to run for a long time, but don't stop. You might hear something chasing after you. Don't stop until you're out of the forest, completely free from the woods. They won't follow you any further. What about the people outside, or whatever the hell they are?" She sighed. "I don't know," she said. "This is the first time hearing about them." "I'm sorry, I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you there." I took a deep breath. "Okay, that's fine," I said. "But could you stay on the line with me?" "Absolutely," she said. "I'll be here. Also, one more thing you need to know about the basement. Don't..." She stopped mid-sentence and I looked at my phone. An empty battery sign lingered on the screen for just a moment before it went black. I stared at the screen for a long time. And then I just sat there. If you've never experienced sheer dread before, it's a weird kind of feeling. It nearly takes you out of your own body. But then I remembered what she told me, that eventually this would end, that I still had a chance. Once again I looked through the window. The figures were all still there, though they appeared to have moved closer. Or maybe not. I didn't want to think about it, and so I backed away. Be patient, I told myself, just wait it out. I went back upstairs and got into one of the showers. If I had to wait, then I may as well be comfortable while I did so. The warm water felt nice, even more so as it was able to wash away the mud that had begun drying on my skin. I saw a bottle of shampoo and reached for it. But I hesitated before squeezing any out. It didn't feel right. It felt heavy, as if there was something solid inside of it. I unscrewed the lid and immediately the shower filled up with a deep scent of formaldehyde and rot. I looked inside. The bottle was full of eyeballs. Looks like they had been scooped straight from their sockets. Some of them were blinking. I put it down and turned off the water and left the shower. I rinsed some of the mud off of my clothes in the sink and then squeezed as much water out of the fabric as I could before putting them back on. It certainly wasn't comfortable, but with everything else going on, it wasn't really a big deal. I didn't know what else to do, so I went back downstairs. It was starting to get dark out, something that just put me more on edge. But I tried to focus on something else, like the fact that I was starving. I went into the kitchen and opened up the fridge. There was nothing in there but a small container filled with some dark, sludgy-looking substance. I didn't open it up. Instead, I tried rifling through the cabinets, eventually finding one that was stocked with MREs. U.S. Army rations dated 1968, about a dozen of them. I didn't know what to make of it, so I just began opening them up, collecting the contents that I thought could have been edible. In the end, it just amounted a bunch of crackers and hard candies, along with one pack of instant coffee that hadn't yet solidified, which was a fine enough meal given the circumstances. I was checking the window every few minutes, and every time the figures seemed to be getting closer. It was hard not to stress about it, but they at least appeared to be moving at a snail's pace. It'd be a long while before they reached the house. I paid close attention to the rain as well. At times I'd sit on the couch for hours and just listen to it. But it never slowed down. It only poured harder. As the last daylight drained from the sky, the house was practically underwater. I could see nothing anymore. Water began leaking in from the door and from the ceiling in one of the bedrooms. I tried watching the television in the living room, but could only access one channel. It looked like handheld footage of an attic, the sole source of light being a candle on the floor. Somebody was sitting in front of it, their back turned to the camera. I could tell from the outline of their naked body that they were frail, skin clinging loosely to bone. After a while, they began pounding their fists on the floor, and I thought I could hear noise coming from somewhere upstairs. I turned off the television and everything went silent. I didn't turn it back on. Soon I could hear a scratching noise like fingernails on wood. I traced the source of it to the other side of the wooden door, the basement. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen. Water began leaking in from the bottom. It was murky, as if it were mixed with dirt or blood or both. It smelled horrendous. I just sat back down on the couch. After a while, I got the sense that I was being watched. Through the windows, I could see nothing but my own reflection. Then I turned the lights off, and after my eyes had adjusted to the dark, I could make out the outline of somebody looking in. It almost looked like their face was pressed up to the glass. I tried turning the lights back on, but they were no longer working. It was so dark that I could barely see my own hand in front of my face. But maybe it was for the best, because then they wouldn't be able to see me. That awful smell from the water leaking in from the basement began to intensify, like sulfur mixed with metal, with a hint of a rot. I could also smell something burning. A strange heat filled the room. Soon I could hear the windows creaking, strain on the glass, as if something were putting gradual heavy pressure on it from outside. It no longer felt safe in the living room, and so I stood up, intending on going back upstairs. Then I realized I could no longer see anything at all. It was quite literally pitch black. I couldn't even tell where the windows were, which didn't make any sense. Because shouldn't there have been at least a little moonlight? I began using my hands to feel around to guide my way towards the stairs. Eventually, I found the railing. As I was making my way up the steps, I nearly tripped over something. It was a person sitting on the steps. Their skin was cold and clammy. Then they began to cry. The crying soon turned into sobbing, which turned into wailing. I ran up the rest of the stairs and I heard it chasing after me. It sounded like they crawling on all fours. I felt along the wall until I found one of the bedrooms and then rushed in and shut the door behind me. Whatever was on the other side began slamming it, each impact rattling the frame. The wailing then turned into a horrific, inhuman shriek. I was still clutching the knife, though it didn't provide much comfort. My heart was beating faster than it ever had. Faster than I thought possible. Each slam was more furious than the last, and soon I could hear the wood beginning to splinter. The shriek filled the room, and it was loud enough to make my head hurt. I scrambled through the darkness until I found the bathroom, shutting myself inside it right as I could hear the bedroom door being ripped off its hinges. I listened as it stalked its way around the room. Sounded like a dead body being dragged in circles across the carpet. I tried to stay as silent as possible, thinking that maybe it didn't know I was in here. But then it stopped moving, and then it knocked on the door. "Police, open up," it said. The voice sounded human enough. I was nearly tempted to listen. "Open up. Police." But I stayed still. "If you don't open the door, I'm gonna come in there and rip your stomach out." A few more of these threats, and then it changed tactics. "Look what you've done," it said now in my dad's voice. "Fucked everything up. You could have had a good life. What have you done?" I shook my head. "Fuck you," I muttered under my breath. "What was that?" it responded. It actually sounded exactly like him. "Get your ass out here right now, right fucking now." I'd done a good job of staying composed up until this point, but it was all starting to become too much. You can only experience so much terror before it starts to overload your senses. I guess for some it ends up paralyzing them. But something else happened to me. The fear turned into disbelief, which then turned into rage. Because what was the point of all this? Was it just to scare me? For what? Why me? What the hell had I done wrong? I started asking these things aloud. Then I walked up to the door, pressed my head against the wood. "What the fuck is this?" I screamed, letting out all my frustrations out at once. "What do you fucking want?" They went silent. The knocking stopped as well, but they didn't leave. I could still hear their raggedy breaths on the other side. I continued to scream. "If you want to open up the door, go ahead and fucking do it. Do it and go fuck yourself. Do it and go to hell. I don't care. I don't care anymore. Get this fucking bullshit over with." Soon my throat was raw, spit flying all over my lips and chin. I was clenching my jaw hard enough for it to hurt. So you're just gonna fucking stand there, do something. What's the fucking point of this? What's the fucking point? Do something or fuck off and let me leave. After this, my memories became scattered. I remember continuing to scream even as my voice turned hoarse. I remember the rage I felt even though I couldn't recall exactly what was said. I remember threatening voices coming from the drain in the sink, water splashing inside the toilet, the shower turning off and on, a burning smell filling up the room. They were really trying, doing everything they could, but I think it just pissed me off even more. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke up, the room was bright. I sat up, seeing sunlight streaming in from the window. And then the pain hit me. My knuckles were bruised, pieces of glass sticking out of them. There was glass, blood, and water all over the floor. The mirror had been shattered, as had the shower door. Holes in the walls. I stood up and looked through the window. No more rain, just a cloudless blue sky. I walked over to the door and opened it cautiously, half expecting to find some monstrosity waiting for me on the other side. But there was nothing. I left the bedroom and went down the stairs and into the living room. The door to the basement was open and it was flooded completely by that dark, foul water. I made sure to avoid stepping on any of it as I made my way to the front door. I opened it up, stepped out into the warm light, then I started running. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, but I never stopped. Not until I had reached a road. My legs were long past their limits at this point, and I just about collapsed the moment my shoes touched the asphalt. I never did hear anything following me, but when I looked back into the forest, I could see somebody standing at the tree line. A young woman in a blue dress. She would have been the most beautiful person I'd ever seen had her perfect features not been contorted into visceral, burning hatred. She continued to scowl at me and I stared back at her. Eventually, a car came by and I waved them down. Two large men. They were wary at first and asked to pat me down before they'd let me in. When they found nothing, they offered to drive me back into town. As we drove away, I looked back at the woods one last time and the woman was no longer there. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to Story 4. I was recalled for a Pale Wake event. I'm not coming back. I was halfway through unpacking when they called. 2 years retired and I still jumped whenever my phone rang. Bad habits from a bad career, I guess. But this call didn't come from any number I recognized. Just a scrambled string of digits and a voice I hadn't heard since my last debriefing. Edward, the phone on the voice said, you're being reactivated. I swallowed hard. It wasn't a surprise, really. I'd been waiting for the day they pulled me back in. We used to call it the retirement mission. One last job you don't get to refuse. You think you're finally free of the order, then the phone rings and you remember. You were never out. You leave in 3 hours, bring nothing personal. Transportation is arranged. I asked where I'm going, just out of instinct, not expectation. You'll be briefed on the way. This is Pale Wake authorized. Then the line cut. I stood in the silence for a long minute, staring at the wall. I had never seen a pale wake clearance in action, only in redacted files and whispered rumors. A global extinction-level protocol, the kind of thing you think is theoretical, until it isn't. 3 hours later, I was on a boat with one bag and a name I hadn't spoken in over a decade. The air was thick with salt and something colder than sea wind. The fog started early and the island didn't show up on any chart. But I knew where we were going. Everyone in the order knows the lighthouse eventually. The boat was small. Inside, just me, the pilot, and a few covered crates tied down under a tarp. I tried to start a conversation once or twice, but the man at the wheel didn't speak. He looked like he'd been doing this route his whole life. Calm, detached from reality. Probably former order himself. They don't use civilians for deliveries like this, only trusted personnel. After a while, I gave up on small talk and stared out into the fog. It was thick enough to make the horizon disappear. There were no waves or sound, just the hum of the engine and a cold pressure in my chest that didn't seem to disappear. The boat rocked gently as we moved forward, and I let my thoughts drift. Not because I wanted to, but because the silence gave me no other choice. It's strange what the mind clings to when there's nothing to distract it, isn't it? I didn't think back to the missions or subjects I encountered. Neither to the briefings printed in red ink and sealed in wax. Not even the containment breaches. I thought about Ellis. He was the first senior agent I shadowed back when I still believed the Order had rules. He was sharp and quiet, not the kind who gave speeches, but he still made you listen. People said he'd seen things at Facility Oxford and never fully recovered from that. He taught me everything I know today. How to survive, thrive in the Order. How to handle the silence. How to recognize when something is watching. Not with eyes, but with intent. Trust the silence more than the sound, he used to say. I thought it was cryptic nonsense back then. Now, with this fog pressing in on all sides, I understand. What's missing tells you more than what's there. I hadn't thought about him in years. He vanished in 2009, mid-assignment. We were told he'd been reassigned to remote observation. That was Order jargon for never ask again. And now they're sending me to the lighthouse. The lighthouse, the one that needs supervision at all times, the one no one leaves. I wondered not for the first time if Ellis ended up there. Am I now being sent to remote observation like he was? Does that mean he died there? And am I going to? I closed my eyes, trying to quiet my thoughts. Breathe, Edward, it'll be fine. The island rose out of the fog like a bruise. There was no dock, just a black stone slick with algae and a rusted metal ladder bolted to the side. The boatman said nothing when I looked at him. He just pointed up. I climbed in silence. Cold wind bit at my knuckles and the ocean below was too still. I half expected to hear waves or gulls, but there was only the slap of wet boots against the ladder. The climb wasn't long, but it still felt endless. At the top, the island stretched no more than a few hundred feet in any direction. There was a single footpath leading to the only structure on the island. The lighthouse. It stood like a monolith swallowed in fog, old stonework patched with rusted plates. Its glass eye was dark, the metal housing around it cracked and weather-torn. I didn't wait for a welcome. The door groaned on its hinges. Inside, I was met with a narrow corridor where only one person could fit. My nose filled with the smell of dust and rot. I heard a dull clang from above me. Then a wet, dragging noise like something was being pulled out of the water. I froze, one hand on the stair rail, and waited. Nothing. I took the stairs slowly, my steps groaning under my weight. The dragon didn't return. At the top, the observation deck was empty. There were no signs of anything I'd heard from below. No movement or footprints, not even water. Whatever had made the noise, it was gone now. Or never there at all, I'm not sure. Back down, I checked the living quarters. There wasn't much to them, just a bed, a rust-stained stink, and a stove with a pot still on the burner. I also found a hatch leading to the generator room. And then, the body, slumped at the desk, collapsed across the logbook, his skin tight over bone, clothes rotted but recognizable beneath the dust. I was right. For all these years, I knew it. It was Ellis. He hadn't aged much, or more precisely, not in the way you'd expect after over a decade. His beard had been white before he vanished, just deeper lines now. After a solemn prayer, I looked down at the open page of the logbook. The last entry was scrawled in a hand I remembered from field reports and briefing memos. The fog isn't moving anymore. I hope they send someone. We need to keep it at bay. I closed the book and stepped back. Above me, the light remained off. I felt the fog pressing against the glass, waiting to be let in. I didn't sleep that night. I don't even think I sat down. I stayed near the main corridor, checking the glass on the upper levels every hour, watching the fog, seeing if they come closer. The light remained off and I couldn't get the generator working. The backup batteries better last, I thought to myself. By morning, if it was morning, visibility dropped to near zero. The fog has grown so thick it pressed against the window, almost bursting in. I couldn't see 10 feet from the upper deck, and yet I kept feeling it, movement. Not physical or measurable, just a shift in the fog. The same way you feel a figure behind you in a mirror, or a shape beneath the ice. God knows I know a lot about this. It circled the entire tower with pressure. Each time the structure creaked, I tensed. Each time the hallway lights flickered, I reached for the wrench propped beside the panel. Eventually, the backup batteries began to fail. A low warning tone echoed up the stairwell before humming. One light at a time. Click, click, click. The emergency corridor went dark. I headed down, fast. The generator room was soaked with water. Was there a breach somewhere? Condensation poured down the walls like veins. Then I saw the cables, coiled around the base of the generator, slick, black, and wrapped around the entire room like roots. They throbbed, not electrically but organically. I stepped closer, aiming to inspect them. The cables twitched ever so slightly, a rhythmic throb. I didn't know when they were, but I know what they weren't. They weren't ours. Something had grown them, or invited them. The light hadn't failed. It had been cut off. Suddenly, Ellis's last words hit me harder than they should have. The fog isn't moving anymore. I hope they send someone. We need to keep it at bay. Not kill it, not make it disappear or wait for it to dissolve, but keep it at bay. This place wasn't meant to contain anything. It wasn't a simple order structure like a facility. It was made to suppress it, delay it. And someone, something, had found a way to interfere. I reached for the manual override but hesitated. The breathing cables hissed beneath my boots. If I restarted the generator, I might trigger something worse. A feedback surge, blowout, or in the worst case, a containment breach. But if I waited any longer, the backup batteries would die, and then it wouldn't matter. I counted backwards from 5, then tore the cables free. The room screamed us, not the metal or machinery, but the entire tower did. Upstairs, the beacon housing cracked. A low tone rumbled through the walls. I heard banging at the windows like the fog was pressing up against it even harder. I sprinted up the stairwell as the tower convulsed, doors slamming open one by one as I passed, water pouring out of them. I reached the main terminal. Power flickered once, then twice. Then the light came on. It wasn't gentle. It struck like the beam sliced through the fog with a scalpel. I saw something within the fog shudder. It recoiled. But it wasn't a creature. That would be simple for me to comprehend. I've seen dozens of those in my years in the Order. This was something else. Something like a distortion. A fold in the world that shouldn't be there. For a second, it looked like a ship, then a face, then me. The beam swept over it again and it was gone. I don't know what it was, but I know it saw me. And the light kept spinning. And since then, it never stopped. I made sure it wouldn't. The fog didn't completely retreat, but I did manage to keep it at bay, as Ellis said. The pressure lifted, both from the tower and from me. The cables in the generator room didn't grow back. I check all the systems daily, confirm power levels. All stable, at least for now. Ellis's logbook was still on the desk. I turned to the earlier pages, ones too faint to read before in the dark, and I read it all. There always has to be one. The light doesn't destroy the thing in the fog. It keeps it asleep. Barely. It doesn't care about the lighthouse. It watches the people inside it. Automated systems fail. They don't emit the same resonance. Presence is what matters, and it knows the difference. Further down, if you're reading this, you already know. They only send the ones who won't walk away. The loyal. The ones who've seen enough not to let it out. You'll stay because you have to. You understand, because who else could they send? I closed the logbook. No ceremony or orders like they usually do. Just the truth, coming straight from Ellis. I found it rather poetic. There was a closet at the base of the stairs. I found a long coat inside of it, which I deduced to be Ellis's. I put it on. The fabric fit like it had always been mine. I cleaned the lenses that evening, checked the beacon timing, repaired what I could from the backup systems. The fog hasn't thickened since, and I've been here for quite some time now. But I still feel it out there, expectant, waiting for an opportunity to attack. The order hasn't called and they won't. That was my last conversation with them. They made sure of it. They sent someone who wouldn't let the world burn. And now I wear Ellis's coat. I sit where he once sat, and I watch the fog turn in the light, waiting for it to move again. Because deep down I know this. It's not the lighthouse that keeps the thing in the fog contained, it's me. Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. My apartment's elevator has been acting strangely. I'm telling this to prove I existed. If someone listened this, maybe it'll mean I was real. Or at least I did. I don't know anymore. Maybe I'm dead. Maybe not. I can't tell how long I've been here. Days, weeks, longer. Time's twisted here. It doesn't behave. I'm not the type to stand out. I'm the kind of person who can disappear for months without anyone truly wondering where I went. I have friends, real ones. Ones who care. Ones who keep trying to drag me back out into the world. But I don't like the world. I like my apartment, my bubble. It's safe, it's quiet, it doesn't judge me. I close my curtains and pretend the city outside doesn't exist. I keep the lights off and the blinds sealed tight. My whole life is inside these walls. Sleep, eat, work online, play games alone, repeat. That cycle became my heartbeat. In here, my time didn't move forward, it just looped. Days blurred together like brushstrokes smeared across the same gray canvas. Loneliness used to hurt, but eventually it became a comfort. At least when you're alone, no one expects anything from you. Until one day, my walls cracked. My friends had been pushing harder than usual. Maybe they sensed something. Maybe they saw through the persona I wear when I occasionally answer their texts. I must have let my defenses down for a moment because I said yes. A week from now. Dinner, one night. Just a short trip out of isolation. I regretted it immediately. That entire week dragged like the countdown to an execution. I barely slept. My chest stayed tight. I kept procrastinating. I kept telling myself I'd cancel, I'd fake an illness. My imagination ran wild, trying to craft believable excuses, but none of them left my mouth. Because I'm an agoraphobic, socially awkward shut-in, not an asshole. I stick to my word, even if it kills me. The day was here before I knew it. My phone lit up with excited messages. My stomach churned like it was full of broken glass. I stepped into the shower for the first time in what felt like forever. My greasy hair resisted the shampoo like it was protesting. I changed out of my pajama pants, those loyal sentinels of comfort, and dressed like someone who belonged in public. Every step toward the front door felt unnatural, like gravity was defying me. I grabbed my phone, my keys, and stared at the doorknob as if it might bite. When I finally opened it, the hallway beyond felt alien, overlit and too quiet. Only 3 other people stood out there, yet I felt exposed, as if their eyes pierced straight through me. I avoided eye contact and made a slow, awkward shuffle to the elevator. Every part of me screamed to turn around, lock the door, disappear. But I didn't. I pressed the button. The elevator opened like it was waiting to swallow me whole. I stepped inside, still trembling. The panel stared back, bland and metallic. I hit the lobby button and the doors closed. I watched my reflection in the brushed steel interior. I looked like a ghost. My hands shook, my eyes were sunken. I felt like a fraud, a walking failure trying to pretend he could just slip back into society. My breathing grew shallow. The descent was slow, too slow. Time warped, stretched like molasses. Then everything changed. A violent jolt shook the elevator. The lights flickered, rapidly strobing like lightning trapped inside the walls. The shaking got worse, like the elevator was resisting gravity. I stumbled, grasped for the emergency button, but it wasn't there. Or rather, it was, translucent, unreal, like a desert mirage pretending to be solid. Only one button was left, glossy, unlabeled. It practically pulsed under the dim light. I didn't want to touch it, but I had no other choice. I pressed it. Instantly, the shaking stopped. The light snapped off, plunging me into suffocating darkness. Silence wrapped around me, thicker than air. I slumped to the floor, then the lights came back, soft, strange, dimmer than before. And the elevator began descending again, smooth, silent, unnatural. I tried to collect myself. I rubbed my eyes and leaned back against the wall. At some point, I must have passed out. When I woke up, nothing had changed. I was still in the elevator. It was still going down. My phone was gone, as if the elevator didn't want me to have it. The panel had changed again. No longer hazy or flickering, it looked solid now. But still. One button. Still no label. And I realized with a sinking horror that I no longer had the tiniest bit of control that I had before. Wherever I was going, it wasn't dinner, it wasn't back to my apartment, it wasn't anywhere I recognized. The elevator was taking me somewhere else. The elevator slowed, then stopped. No ding, no announcement. Just a soft, metallic breath, like something exhaling through the cracks in reality. The doors parted. Beyond them wasn't a lobby, it was a wasteland. The air glistened with a sickly haze that bent light in unnatural ways, warping the horizon like a wave. A scorched sky hung overhead, low and oppressive, painted in shades of nuclear dusk. Deep amber bleeding into toxic moss. The ground was fractured, veined with glowing fissures that pulsed rhythmically, like the earth itself was living. I had to make a decision. After what felt like an eternity, I stepped out against every instinct I had. The elevator didn't wait. It closed behind me and vanished, like it had never been there at all. The silence was violent, no birds, no wind, no signs of life, but somehow I felt watched. Like the land itself had eyes buried somewhere under the cracked soil. My footsteps crunched over glassy fragments of something that might have once been buildings. Metallic skeletons jutted from the ground, twisted beyond recognition. I passed what looked like a melted swing set half buried in ash. A child's toy sat nearby, half disintegrated, staring at me with hollow eyes that made me look away. I tried calling out, just to hear something besides the hum of the atmosphere. My voice came out strange, muted, swallowed instantly like the place didn't want sound. Then I heard it, a groan, a massive heavy exhale from something far off in the distance, something alive. The sound rolled across the wasteland like thunder wrapped in breathing. I dropped to the ground and waited. Far across the glowing ravine, a shadow moved. It was big, no, enormous, something primal and wrong. Its outline shimmered as if reality couldn't decide what shape it should be. It had legs, maybe, or arms, or too many of both. I couldn't tell if it was walking or dragging itself, but every time it moved, the ground beneath it recoiled. I felt it in my bones. I wanted to lay down in the fetal position and disappear, but staying meant being found. And I didn't want to know what happens when it finds someone. I scrambled behind a chunk of rebar, my breath hitching. My throat felt scorched just from being in the air. I scanned for shelter or anything resembling a way out. That's when I saw it. In the distance, a metal structure, boxy, familiar, another elevator. It stood out like a relic from my world, surrounded by twisted terrain like an island of normalcy in a sea of decay. But it was far, too far. And between me and it was the creature. I don't know how long I waited. Time didn't feel real here, but eventually it turned. It moved in another direction, slow and groaning like it had somewhere to be, or maybe it didn't care anymore. I ran. Every step felt like it weighed 100 pounds. The air tasted metallic. The land shifted beneath me like it was trying to make me trip. But I reached the elevator. It was just standing there, no walls, no enclosure, just the doors and the panel. It opened before I pressed anything. I stepped inside, no hesitation. The doors closed, it began to descend. Nothing had changed, but everything felt different. The elevator no longer hummed. It listened. I stayed standing at first, rigid and alert, like prey that hadn't yet been spotted. The fluorescent light above blinked intermittently. Long pauses, brief flickers. Its rhythm broken like a metronome set to an irregular heartbeat. The tension stretched, rubbery and thin. I sat down. The carpet was coarse, cheap. Synthetic fibers pressed into my palms as I lowered myself. The air inside the elevator was thick, bordering on hostile, like the pressure in an airplane just before something goes wrong. I gasped, not from panic, something deeper, like I'd been holding my breath for years without noticing. Like oxygen had been rationed in this place, and now I was stealing it back. My chest rose, fell. Nothing else moved. I lost track of time again. It wasn't hours or minutes. It was something older, something more ancient. I sat there in that suspended moment, breathing as if relearning how. The silence had shape now, filling corners, creeping across surfaces, folding around my body like weighted fabric. Then, ding. Not loud, not cheerful, just inevitable. The doors parted, and he entered, slowly, as if gravity worked differently for him. Each step was surgically placed, heel then toe, with no sound. A silhouette made of wrong angles and soft suggestions of humanity. A suit filled not by flesh, but by the memory of it. His face wasn't blank. It was unfinished. Wet clay smoothed over where features should have formed. All but the eyes, round, bulging, fixed ahead like spotlights in a fog. He didn't acknowledge me, not even with a twitch. He took his place near the doors and stood with the posture of someone used to being ignored. Limp arms, a tilt of the head that spoke of habit, not awareness. If this elevator had mirrors, I wondered if they'd reflect him at all. The doors closed. We descended. The space shrank, not physically but spiritually. The silence grew legs and crawled up the walls, settling into my ears like parasites. I didn't dare shift. Even the sound of blinking felt like a scream. My throat burned with restraint, lungs aching not from lack of air, but the effort it took to remain invisible. A scent crept in. Dust, sweat, old paper, like a forgotten file cabinet forced open in the dark. It wasn't a smell, it was a memory leaking from the vents. Then, ding. He moved, not urgently, not eagerly, just necessarily. The doors opened to a hallway that knew shame, muted colors, carpets in grayscale, fluorescent strips set into the ceiling, sputtering in sequence like Morse code tapping out past mistakes. Doors lined each side, wooden, identical, almost closed but not quite, each one inviting yet hostile. He stepped out. The elevator didn't wait, but I watched. Inside those barely ajar doorways came noises, not words, no language, just reactions. Emotion sculpted into sound, a gasp at the wrong moment, a laugh that wasn't with you. The shrill pitch of someone pretending not to notice you. A whisper meant to be overheard. Figures emerged, clothed in expectation. Business attire, party dresses, school uniforms. They drifted around him, orbiting, talking, living, but never seeing him. Not really. He remained still in the center of their world, unmoving, unmoved. A relic, a placeholder for someone more acceptable, more social, more normal. Their conversations passed through him like smoke. Their joy ignored his presence like it was background noise. Just before the doors slid shut, he turned. Not fully, just enough. Not to make eye contact, just enough to be known. And then he was gone. The elevator was mine again, but emptier. Somehow. During the descent, I reached into my pocket without thinking. And it was there. My phone. I don't remember getting it back. Not after what happened. Not after what should have happened. I don't remember feeling it. I didn't hear it vibrate. But it's here now. Warm. Flickering. Like it never left. So I'm typing this now. From inside the elevator. It's still going down. This time feels longer than the last. The lights overhead still pulse with their slow, rhythmic hum. The walls don't look the same anymore. I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'll be there soon. Story 5 ends here now. Settle in for story 6. Then, the house at the end of our street. There were never any construction crews before it appeared. Nothing to indicate that people had worked on it or that it was planned. Where there once been a lot, there was now a house. But this house was not like the ones that surrounded it. Our street was not a place where the populace thrived and extravagance ran through. We were modest in our living quarters, our one-story homes more than sufficed. But this house towered over us, casting a shadow over our sleepy town. Its design imitated a mansion more than presented as one. Staring at the windows only revealed them to be glass panes attached to the brick wall with no way to look inside. The side door was attached to what was supposed to be a chimney, causing fire to jump out whenever it opened. Catching the garage door opening revealed it to open sideways, much like the front. The more you stared, the more nonsensical the building became. Our cul-de-sac was tight-knit, but welcoming. Our neighbors were the first to attempt to welcome these new guests. They had stopped by our house before walking over. My memories of 30 years ago failed to recall specifics, but they invited my parents to their surprise housewarming. My parents denied. Our neighbors then left to go to the house at the end. They never came back. The next day, where my neighbor's house once been, a sign reading "for occupation" stood on its ground. It lay empty for weeks before another of house came in its place, bringing with it new occupants. What can I say of those occupants? My parents never wanted me to come close to them, for like the houses they inhabited, they seemed like imitation rather than flesh. Their white teeth always shone in a smile that was just wide enough to cross over from friendly to creepy. Their skin, it crossed the barrier of what could be considered pale into almost ghost white. And their mannerisms, even their bizarre appearances, would have been excused if not for the way they acted. Their speech sounded strung together, like the words they spoke belonged to different sentences spoken in different ways. When outside, sometimes they would just walk around in a circle, or they'd start mismatching chores like painting the grass or using a lawnmower to vacuum their car. Other times they would just stand and stare. Sometimes I felt that they were staring at me. My parents forbid me from going anywhere near that house, which after a while soon became houses. I heeded their demands not out of obedience to them, but out of fear for my own safety. And although many neighbors and friends went towards that house, getting replaced not soon after we stood our ground. I remember that when my mother was still on the town council, major chances had come about due to the house. Our schools, infrastructure, and other utilities suffered major cuts by the mayor, all so they could reallocate funds as somewhere else. They would shy away when you ask where the money was going. My mother was the only opposition on the council to this change, but was quickly outvoted by the other members of the council. I sat in one of those meetings once when my father was busy and couldn't look after me. I saw he scream on deaf ears and cry out every word of her plea, but everything she did was dismissed in a monotone voice. I caught for a glimpse what the mayor and council were paying for. As Mom stormed out of the hall, the members gathered in a meeting room next to the main entrance. My eyes caught what I assume now to be the budget chart of the city, and taking up what I believe to have been almost 70% of it was just something called house. The council disbanded soon after, Although the vote was not unanimous, the other members just never showed back up to meetings, leaving my mother to have to deal with everything alone. Soon, however, the mayor personally showed up to fire her. At that point, I hardly recognized the man anymore. Ever since he reallocated the funds, he started getting paler, his smile more toothy, his grin growing wider. I could sense he was becoming more like the imitators at that house. My mother cried that day, that night, and the next morning. I tried to console her, but she pushed me away. Before I left, I heard her mumbling something. That wasn't my friend anymore. Now that my mother was without a job now, my father was the sole breadwinner for our family. But it wasn't as if his place was free of that house's influence. He told us night after night about how those things have picked up jobs at his place of work. They didn't seem to even do anything productive other than to type random letters on a notepad or even resting their head on their computer. Yet despite everything, they were praised by upper management all the time, even promoted faster than my father ever was. Soon enough, even his new boss was one of those imitators, as he called them. This continued for years. My mother searched for a new job, but each one was either run by an imitator or rejected her for her criminal record. My mother, who never so much as stole a candy bar and would never hurt a fly, now had a criminal record. I inferred it had something to do with the council, but I couldn't know for certain. This had also made me an outcast, as my former friends turned on me for not bowing down to these new invaders. They called me names and pushed me around while they got showered in riches and the latest toys, accessories, and other forms of opulence. All the while, they were oblivious to their own transformation. It wasn't until college where I managed to escape from town. I went somewhere far away where they couldn't follow me. Driving out seemed almost like a nightmare. Each resident of those houses and those who had given in were all outside on their lawns. I could feel their eyes on me, so I tried not to stare back. Once I had left, I felt something I hadn't since before those things came. Relief. I've had a normal life from that point onwards. I've started a family, made friends, and found a career in history, a passion of mine. For now, I've been able to have a pretty normal life. I've only been back to my childhood town once, though, and with my hindsight, I realized that was a grave mistake. I had gotten a call from my mother. Apparently, things have gotten even worse for them since I left. The house have started to grow. Some even started to connect. My mother even says she can feel a heartbeat when walking near one. I knew I couldn't leave them there, so I rushed to get them as fast as I could. Going back, I found the most unusual surprise. The signs that had once displayed the name of the town only said one thing: "Welcome home." I knew I really shouldn't have tried to go further, but I didn't want my parents to be left alone in that hell. Going in, I saw what my mother was talking about. The houses looked like what you'd think a child would design after asking about his dream home. Everyone was taller, with rooms sticking out of each other and even being diagonal at some points. Everyone was outside, staring at me that same way, just like when I left. I ignored them. My parents were my top priority after all. Coming to my cul-de-sac, I saw something I had only ever read about in science fiction before. It was the house from all those years ago, but now it looked almost like an organ. It had what I could only describe as tendrils sticking out of it, connecting the other houses that looked even more grotesque. It could see every branch of it moving, beating almost like a heart. But that didn't hit me as hard as when I saw my former home. It was completely covered in those tendrils. Not an inch of the house even showed. I tried calling my parents. Maybe they had gotten out before whatever had happened. My hope, fading with each ring, eventually died out when I saw the tendrils start to contract. This thing had trapped my parents inside, and now it was slowly suffocating them. There was no doubts about it now. I know others that would have been braver and tried to ram into these tendrils to save their loved ones. Unfortunately, I am not one of them. I drove away like a coward right then and there. I let my parents die without a fight. No one tried to stop me from leaving and got to my house after a long and arduous drive. I still blame myself for what happened. If only I had thought to get them out of there before the house took revenge. If only I tried to fight back against this monster, maybe they would still be here. I cried just like my mother did all those years ago. After the service, I started up a habit of driving around the whole town now. My wife thinks I'm getting paranoid, but I know what I saw. And I know what happens if you don't get away fast enough. I don't know if whatever that house is has started to spread, but the first time I see one of those monstrosities enter my town, I am protecting my family and moving as far away as we can. Hell, I've even started getting concerned now, as one of my friends showed me some vacation photos with one of those things in the background. Just knowing they're spreading is putting me on edge. But what concerns me even more were the faces of those outside the house. They had the same exact faces as my mother and father, and they were looking right at the camera. The sixth story has come to an end. Now it's time to knock on the door of the seventh. The seminarian said he found a lost gospel. Then he vanished. The other day I met this kid who's in seminary. He's doing his residency, or whatever they call it, at the church my wife and I attend. She wanted to get more involved, so we wound up at an event with the whole congregation. She mingled, I stood in the back. I'm quiet. That's how I came to meet the seminary kid. He approached me while I was back there alone. I think he somehow sensed I had wisdom for him, that I had been in his shoes not too long ago. I say this because we were soon talking about the Bible, then philosophy, and then dread. My three greatest understandings. But the more he went on, the more troubling it all became. I understood what was happening to an extent, and it was troubling. These are dangerous things to talk about, I told him, half joking. I invited him to go fishing. We can talk more about it then. That's not too uncommon around here. We live in a gray fishing town, and fishing is indeed a setting where wisdom is exchanged. It has been that way for a long time. As long as man itself, I think. I'm more of a houndsman, but I do know how to fish. Of course I do, I just don't care for the sport of it anymore. Nothing against fly fishing, but I prefer a cane pole. It's simpler. All of this sounds irrelevant, but it's exactly what I was planning on telling the seminary kid. It would all tie into the moral of the story. The cane pole would be both real and metaphorical, avoiding the complex when unnecessary. Simpler, but when fishing day came, he was grouchy, quite clearly. I thought he might lighten up while we crafted our cane poles, but he did not. His spirit was in a quagmire of despair. We tied up the lines, got the worms soaking, and were quick to start talking again. But my planned speech broke apart fast. He really started going off. Okay, so now I'll try to explain what was going on in the kid's head, but you'll have to go with me here. You might call his ailment academic heresy. It is heresy that is birthed through research. The kid had read so thoroughly into the Bible that he started thinking it was all a lie. When people like me and him get interested in first-century Christianity, we often get interested in the Christianities that didn't survive. The lost heresies. We know a few of them. The Gnostics are particularly famous, though scholars now argue that the various groups lumped under that name were too different to be called the same thing. There's also the Marcionites, and whatever community wrote the Gospel of Thomas. The Ebionites. Anyway, from a historical perspective, heretical 1st and 2nd century Christianities are deeply fascinating. But it's tragically common for young people who gain an interest in these subjects to convince themselves they've uncovered some ancient conspiracy. That one of these heresies was actually the true Christianity. They claim to back it up with textual and material evidence. That's what the seminary kid was up to. I suspected it from the beginning and had a speech plan to ease into it gently, but it failed, truly. When I did finally get a chance to interrupt his antics, I tried to explain what was happening without hurting his pride. That's not always easy. I told him these heretical texts are more fun than the New Testament, but less historically accurate. There's near universal agreement, even among secular scholars, that Paul's 7 undisputed letters and the Synoptic Gospels are the most accurate depictions of the historical Jesus. Of course, he brought up the hexing of the true saints. And of course, that was his main focus. Okay, so there are a lot of heretical texts. I already brought up the Gospel of Thomas. But the hexing of the true saints is one literally never mentioned in academic circles, but cannot seem to be fully erased from all the dark caverns of the internet. Most scholars don't even know about it, and the ones that do won't admit they do. Let me explain some of the history here. All present-day Christian churches originate from what historians call the Proto-Orthodox Church. So the Catholic Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, all forms of Protestantism are descendants of the Proto-Orthodox Church. Now, at the time of the Proto-Orthodox Church, there were other Christian churches that did not survive. They were silenced, and the proto-Orthodox Church's beliefs became dominant. These beliefs also happen to have the best understanding of the historical Jesus. The hexing of the true saints is some internet-born document that claims to be authentic. Its fictional narrative purports that the proto-Orthodox Church, although of course that's not the name they used, crafted a hex, curse, jinx, spell, with a demon, I've forgotten its name, and used it to condemn all opposing Christians to nod. The land of confusion, the heretics, or the true saints, LOL, were sent into a living state where they could never quite make sense of things and could only remember life in fragments that did not connect. They were confused until death. Those hexed could be identified by a scar on their heart, a scar formed from fire that does not burn but bewitches, or so the phony text says. I had been in the seminary kid's shoes before, and so I wanted to steer him away from this kind of thinking. It pains me that I couldn't keep things calm. We started arguing. We were throwing lines of scripture at each other, saying things like criterion of multiple independent source attestation and what have you. I was never actually mad at him, but he got mad at me. At some point we hit a stalemate and just stood there in silence, boots in the water, holding our cane poles, sometimes swatting away gnats. Then he said, "I'm gonna go take a piss," which, mind you, was strange coming from a kid training to be a priest. They're just people like you and me, Catholic priests and their students. But they don't talk like that. Point is, I could see his faith leaving him. I could see it like the last shiver of smoke from a cold match. Not just his faith, his reasoning, his common sense, his ability to not always feel like something was off, though he could never quite put his finger on what it was. He would be lost forever. Now I think this next part was a sign from God, but I don't quite understand it. While he was pissing, his cane pole got yanked from the grass. Thankfully, it got snagged on some thicket and I had time to stomp down on it. I started hollering that he had a fish, but he didn't answer. I asked if he wanted me to pull it in. Still nothing. He couldn't have been that far. I acted on instinct and pulled it in. It was a decent base. If it weren't on such heavy line, it might have broken it. It was a good fish, and we were catching nothing that day, and right when he goes to take a piss, he catches it. A good one. This happens a lot to fishermen. It's almost a cliche now. But this time it felt like more than happenstance. But I don't understand it. So the kid never came back. I waited. I called for him and I looked around a little, but he was gone. Somehow I knew that he was just walking home, so I didn't panic exactly. I packed everything up, drove off, and about a mile down the road there he was, walking home. It was awkward, but I couldn't just drive right past him, you know? So I rolled down the window and asked if he was okay. He said he was. I knew he would say that. I asked if he wanted a ride. He said no. I knew he would say that too. I offered. There was nothing more to do. I told myself maybe the long walk would help him. Maybe it would give him time to reflect on what I'd said, because I had warned him. He could not say that he wasn't warned. But now there was this other awkward part. I went to confession and told our parish priest about the incident. It's uncomfortable bringing your priest into your personal drama, especially when the two of you are close, and especially if the person in question is the seminarian doing his residency, or whatever they call it, at his church. But I had to tell him. It sounds like tattletaling, but it was not. This was a serious matter, and I had seen the consequences. I wanted to help the kid. But then the priest stopped me halfway through my explanation, saying, "Wait, sorry, who are you referring to?" "That kid in seminary." "Which kid in seminary?" "The one who was here helping out." "When?" "These past few weeks." "What did he look like?" "Well," I said, "I can't really remember." The priest sighed. I said, "I met him at that event. Lots of people were there. My wife met him." He said, "Michael, we haven't hosted a seminarian in years." I chuckled a little. "You don't have a wife. You've never had a wife." I couldn't seem to respond. He said, "I hope it isn't you, Michael, who is having these ideas again. A metaphor for yourself. Because as we have warned you, they come with serious consequences." He reminded me of how tempting it can be for a young man to get interested in the historical Jesus. He starts reading about the Q source, Paul's 7 undisputed letters, the criterion of dissimilarity. Then he finds some heretical text, something called the hexing of the true saints, or whatever dramatic title its author gave it, that they can't quite get rid of for some fucking reason. It always slithers its way back, and when that creeping young man finds the hexing of the true saints, he might start thinking there is some truth to its nonsense. He might start talking about it. And we can't have that, right, Michael? I still couldn't really speak. Touch the scar on your chest. It is from a burn. It was placed there by fire that is immaterial. It is shaped like something. I think it has been there for a long time.